Sejam muito bem-vindos a mais uma aula do curso de aproveitamento energético de resíduos sólidos. E hoje eu tenho a honra de apresentar o professor Klaus Fricke, que vai falar sobre a gestão de resíduos na Alemanha, um panorama atual e as perspectivas futuras. O professor Klaus, ele é engenheiro, doutor em engenharia, professor e diretor do Departamento de Gestão de Recursos e Resíduos da Universidade de Braunschweig, é especialista em gestão de resíduos sólidos. Ele foi responsável pela implementação do sistema de coleta seletiva e compostagem de orgânicos nos anos 80, é consultor do Ministério, de vários ministérios na Alemanha, desenvolveu e monitorou vários projetos de tratamento mecânico biológico, CDR, de fermentação e compostagem, e também desenvolveu projetos na área de mining em aterros sanitários. Ele planejou e monitorou a implementação e operação de mais de 200 plantas de tratamento mecânico biológico, biodigestores e compostagem entre os anos 80 e final dos anos 90, né? E ele tem mais de 150 publicações em revistas científicas, incluindo 22 livros. Então, Klaus, é com você, boa sorte, um prazer escutar a sua palestra aqui no nosso curso.
Okay. So, hello everybody, and hope you feel good in Brazil. I never in my life was so long time not in Brazil since the last 1.5 years. And so I miss this country, and Christiane will organize, I hope, that before Christmas we have a meeting in Brazil. So my presentation now is more or less a summary of all the other presentations I had done in the last months with you, but I will focusing a little bit on European and German law, a very recent law, and about some results about separate collecting and at end. So, at first, again, you see the picture of all involved universities. You can read it or not. So, let's start. I like to start with talking a little bit about the driving forces for sustainable waste management. At first, resource protection, no question. And second part is the environmental protection, and with the main part of climate protection. And the problems we had in the last months in Germany, in Europe, and all over the world open also in Europe and in Germany many eyes by politicians, so that they recognized now it's 5 minutes before 12, according to climate change. And background is that a sustainable waste management could be one of the main parts in climate change protection. And so I every time will have a little bit of focus in my presentation to what we are doing, what we will do in the future in Germany and in Europe, and what and where are how it's concerning to climate change. And another part is also marine litter. I think everybody of you knows it in Brazil, but I think it is a question of waste management and also wastewater management. And in Germany, mainly wastewater management, because you have this microplastic in the wastewater coming from creams, coming from washing powder and an end. But in countries like Southeast Asia, Central Asia, but also Brazil, it's also a question of waste littering in the countryside, but also at the end in the rivers, and so at the end in the oceans. And here you see the strategies. I don't want to explain it in detail because we will talk now about this different kind of strategies. But let me give you an actual overview about activities in Europe. So, sorry, at first, some numbers to climate change. Some of you know these numbers, but I will repeat it that you have again the background before I will talk about climate change. You see here the development of greenhouse gas emission in Germany from 1990 to 2019. We have a reduction of 446 tons of carbon dioxide equivalents, starting by 1,200,000 tons. So 29 million tons we achieve by reducing emission by waste management measures, 29 million tons. That means around 5% of the total reduction rate. But this is not everything. So at first, when you count, when you balance the greenhouse gas emission, you have on one hand the reduction of direct emissions, for example, emission from landfill. And you will see landfill emission as the main part of greenhouse gas reduction. But we also have the opportunity to get credits. That means green or carbon dioxide equivalents in the form of credits. That means when you do recycling, you reduce the amount of waste on one hand, and on the other hand, you save a lot of energy because the recycling process saves energy when you compare it to taking original materials. And so this emission reduction is calling credits or emission credits. And so at the end, the total result of greenhouse gas reduction is on one hand, the reduction of a direct emission, and on the other hand, the emission credits gaining by recycling processes. And so you have another 20 million tons you can save by recycling. So, and you see, when we talk about the emission reduction by landfill, it's more or less 80% we can generate by closing landfills. And the background is, I have to repeat it every time. When we talk about landfill, when we talk about modern landfills, for example, we have in Germany, in Europe, and some in Brazil, the most modern landfills achieve maximum 45% of the greenhouse gases, because the main production time is during operation. And during operation time, it is more or less not possible to collect the greenhouse gases, the greenhouse gas emission. That means methane generating from the waste in the landfill. The average in Germany is not 45, it's 28 only. So for this background, and according to climate change, landfills are or is the worst instrument in the area of waste management. And all targets you have must be reducing the waste before landfill and deactivate the waste so that the waste is not possible to biodegradation, and producing methane. These are the main goals. So let's come back to Germany. For example, you see a balance of credits you can gain in Germany. This is a balance from 2011. That means in 2011, around 20 million tons, we have a reduction of greenhouse gases by gaining credits. But this number shows you that we have, when we optimize our separate collection end, we can lift up this number up to more or less 33 million tons. So that means when we talk about separate collection end, we have a lot to do also in Germany to optimize our waste management systems. But what you also see when you see these numbers, where we have the highest amounts of credits we can gain by waste management measures. And this is at first paper and cardboard. By separate collection and recycling and using paper and cardboard as a secondary resource, we can reduce or we can gain credits by around 6 million tons a year. So paper is one of the most important fractions. For example, in Germany, we have to reduce the greenhouse gases. Also, bio-waste is important. For example, by optimized bio-waste, we can reduce greenhouse gases by around 2.6 million tons. And at the end, when we go to the light packages, this means packages mainly produced with plastic components. So we have a reduction rate by optimal way of doing by around 5 million tons. But in all areas, we have a very high potential for optimizing. So this is the background. So when we talk about credits, it's very important that we have to differ between the situation in Germany and the situation in Brazil. Why? When you save, for example, 1 kilowatt hour by recycling, you can gain credits in Germany by 0.4 kilograms carbon dioxide and in Brazil only by 0.29 kilograms carbon dioxide. Why? It's very simple. This is the number of carbon dioxide emission by the German electricity mix. And this number is higher than in Brazil because your part in Brazil, your part of renewable energy is higher because of your water power. But on the other hand, this is the reason that you get only 29 kilograms carbon dioxide in kind of credits. So that means in future, when we have 100% when you have 100% the production of electricity by using renewables or renewable energies, then you don't have any kind of credits, only credits by reducing emissions. So this is the background before we talk about recycling and legal framework. So you see this hierarchy. I will repeat it because this is very important. Avoidance, reuse, recycling, energy recovery, and at the end, disposal. So the future is very clear when we talk about circular economy, and this is the This is the future. This is the target of waste management, of sustainable waste management. We don't have any kind of disposal, and we don't have energy recovery. We have it only when we have renewable waste components like wood, like paper, like organic components, and an. It is not allowed to burn or to incinerate plastic components. That means C, fossil components. This will be the future, but I think we need a lot of time in both countries to achieve this target. So let's start with the circular economy packages from the European Union. So we start in July of this year, so that there are a lot of plastic one-way packages. They are forbidden, so it was not allowed to use these components. You see some parts of these components, and the European countries said, the European Union, 70% of all marine litter components are banned from the year 2021 in the future. You see, I have a question mark behind it. I don't believe it. But I think maybe this is the first step to reduce the amount of one-way plastic components. Another part, we have from the beginning of this year in the European Union, and we have to transform it in this year into national right. You know, in all environmental question, we have the main part is decided by the European Union. They formulate the law, but they said the special members, the member states, have to transform it in national environmental law or national waste management law. And for example, there's one part, a plastic tax. And this plastic tax means that you have a tax by 80 euro cent per kilogram of non-recycled plastic waste. That means the plastic waste you have not recycled, you have to pay 800 euro each ton. What is the background? The European Union want to press the companies who produced packages, that they produced packages you can recycle, and not this different kind of different plastic materials and so it's unimportant to recycle this material. And this is one instrument to press the companies to produce recyclable plastic packages. And there are some other requirements from some European parties, but also from environmental associations. They said you have to pay 2 euro of used virgin plastic. That means if you produce packages from plastic and you use virgin plastic, you have to pay 2 euro each kilogram. That means 2,000 euro each kilogram. So the target of this requirement is that they push the production of recycling of, on one hand, of plastics packages, and on the other hand, they press the companies to produce packages they can recycle. Very simple. So there's a huge movement we have now in the market of plastic packages. And this is one of the biggest problems we have at the moment in the European Union and also in Germany. Background is that the European Union required 65% of recycling. We don't achieve it at the moment, and we can achieve it only when we lift up the plastic recycling. And still have in your mind when we talk about plastic recycling and using recycling plastic, you reduce the amount of waste. And maybe if you start with bio-based plastic, then you reduce the C fossil amount or part of the waste. One part for the future is fossil-free waste, because you want to reduce all oil components in the production of plastics. It's also a part of climate protection and also a part of resource protection. Some other ideas we had at the moment, the European Union required that every materials, every packages has to take a deposit. You must have deposits on all packages for beverage bottles and beverage cans. This is a very important part. Another part, for example, for PET recycling, in the year 2025, you must have a recycling part of 25%, and in 2030, you have 30%. I think this is not very ambitious, but it's the first step. And I think they discuss this amount in 2030, and they discuss at the moment 50%. So these are all activities in the area of plastic. And for example, when you see now the circular economy packages in European Union, you see the numbers you have to achieve in 2025 and 2030, and you see the amount in total is 60%, packaging 70%, and. So we have on one hand the European Union, we have Germany, and we have Brazil. I think the laws in the European Union are very strong, but they are not so strong, I think you believe. So we have a lot of countries. They will achieve these numbers. Because the power the European Union has to control the countries is not so huge as we need to achieve these numbers. But there are some countries, for example, it's like Austria, Germany, Dutch, Denmark, or all the Scandinavian countries. I think they will achieve these numbers in the next years. So let me give a short impression what we do in Germany, for example. You see here this different kind of plastics we have in Germany. It's a reality in 2019. Amount of recycling products, of recycling. These are 152,000 tons, but we have around 730,000 tons of mixed plastics. And this is around 65% of all our plastic packages in our waste. And when you see the amount, the real amount of recycling, then you see when we have clear material, materials you can make a good recycling step, then you have very high proportions of recycling rates. So normally these are plastics with only one polymer, and so not a mixture of different kind of polymers. And when you see at the end the mixed plastics, the biggest amount of all plastic, we have only a recycling rate of 5.3%. Why? It's very simple. It's too expensive. We have these technologies. We can make recycling, maybe a material recycling, or maybe a chemistry recycling. for example, to produce oil of it or to produce gas of it. But this is the reality for the German companies. The amount of recycling is too high, and so what we are doing? What do you think what we are doing with these plastics? We export it. We export it to Malaysia, to Poland, in former time to China, and an end. And then you can find, for example, when they put it from the landfills there, for example, in rivers and in the ocean, then you find German waste in the oceans, German plastic waste. This is the reality. Now the European Union starts to close this transport over the frontiers. So they will close totally the European to export different kind of waste components. This is the one way, and the other way is to control the countries who take this recycling material. Then on the other hand, it is an opportunity to get waste, to sort it, and to have new secondary raw materials. But you have to control it. This is very important. So this is the reality of plastic recycling in Germany. And these targets of landfilling, you see, in the year 2035, it's allowed only 10% of landfill, the amount of waste disposal on landfills. And for some countries, particularly in the eastern part of Europe, they have to achieve it in 2040. So, but now look about the situation in Europe. You see, these countries are surrounded by a frame. In these countries, we have more or less a reduction of landfill ban by more than 95%. So no problem to achieve these numbers from the European Union. But when you see now these other kind of countries, particularly in the eastern part, then you see the amount of landfill is still very high in Europe. And we start at the moment to support these countries with money to implement MBT technology, to implement separate collection. Because we know it is very cheap to reduce carbon dioxide emission from landfills by closing landfills, by MBT technology, by recycling. This is one of the most cheapest area to reduce greenhouse gas emission. And so this is so important that the European Union at the moment took a huge amount of activities in this area. Last point, food waste. What we do with food waste. We have a lot of food waste in the European Union and also in Germany. For example, in Germany, we have 11 million tons of food waste. Food waste, it is not a waste. It's from this moment on waste when you bring it to in the waste bin or to a landfill. This is normal a material you can use for food as for eating. So we said in Germany, this is amount of 25 billion euros every year. And 60% of this food coming from households. So try to reduce this amount of food. You save a huge number of greenhouse gases because this waste you don't have to produce. And this is a very important part with a lot of activities we start now in the European Union. And I'm really sure in the cities of Brazil, you will have more or less the same situation. That you have a lot of food waste in the waste. So, last point, I think very important for us, but also for Brazil. This is a European ETS trading of carbon dioxide emission. In former times, we had very low amount of this carbon dioxide emission price. We are between 2 euros and 10 euros, and then we start in 2020, and now this price is around 65 euro, or sorry, I'm not sure, euro or dollars. No, 65 euros each ton of carbon dioxide. That means the industry in Europe and also in Germany who emitted by, for example, using fuels, fossil fuels, who emitted, for example, carbon dioxide, they have to buy allowance that they can emit. And now they are very expensive. And there is some trading activities, for example, between Brazil and the European Union, so that European companies can reduce in Brazil different kind of carbon dioxide emission by different industrial sectors, and they can gain, for example, or they can get or gain these European credits or this European allowance to produce carbon dioxide here in Europe. So it's very interesting for projects between, for example, the European countries of the European Union and countries, for example, like Brazil. So I think all these activities have one target. This is climate, reducing climate change, protection of the climate by reducing fossil components, by, for example, reducing carbon dioxide emission by waste activities, but also by using fossil fuels, so that at the end we can reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emission. This is the main target at the moment we have here in Europe, and maybe you have heard about these water problems we had in Germany with such a round of 180 deaths. And now I think everybody knows that we will have a problem in the future. But I must say at the moment, I don't believe in the target of 1.5 centigrade. I think when we achieve 2, then it would be, we can be very happy. So these are some activities in the law, in the organization of waste management in the European Union. So let's come to the waste amount and composition. I think some of you know this table. I will show it again because I think this is very important. We have on one hand the waste in Germany 20 years ago when we start with separate collection. China, Brazil, Thailand, India, Java. So what you see, the amount of organic matter is very high. And the amount of, for example, paper, cardboard or plastics is depending on the countries. In some very poor countries, you have a very low amount of plastic. You can say more or less, the lower the amount of plastics and paper and an end, the higher the amount of organics. But what does it mean? What does it have for a consequence in water content and in calorific value? And you see here the calorific value in Germany is between 8 and 9,000 kilojoules per kilogram. In China, between 4 and 7.3. In Brazil, between 6 and 8, and. So in these countries, you have more or less no chance that the waste is burning. Background is by physical way, you need in minimum 3 3.5 up to 4 kilojoule per kilogram to start a self-burning process. But when you see the difference between one day and another day, 1 week and another day, another week, then you need 6,000 kilojoule. For example, China, they implemented, I think, around 60 facilities in the beginning of the century. But they don't recognize the low amount of calorific value. So they have to add char to start burning process. So this is very important that you have in your mind. You have to look at your waste composition. I think Christiana maybe can tell something about this because she makes her PhD work about it. And when you have these numbers about the waste composition, this is the first main important information you need to start management or to start waste management ideas and to develop this kind of instruments. But when you compare these numbers, you see here in Germany, we have, before we start with separate collection, for example, 47% of organics, of bio-waste in the waste. And now you see the numbers from today. We have still 39. So it's very easy to explain. When you have, for example, a separate collection in the area of glass, in the area of papers, in the area of glass, metals, plastics, and also bio-waste. So you reduce the entire amount of waste, but the percentage of each fraction more or less is not changing. So this is one reason that we have such a high amount of bio-waste. But I will explain you a little bit later. The amount of bio-waste and the recycled amount of bio-waste is not satisfactory for us because the amount is absolutely too low. So when we have in our background the composition of waste, then the next step you have to do is think about what will happen in the future. And I give you here an idea we discuss here in Europe and in Germany. And so you have to discuss it in your country too. What happened, for example, with paper? We have a very intensive sinking, decreasing of the amount of paper. We had it in the last years and we will have it also in the future. Cardboard. We have an incredible increasing by online shopping. This is the main reason. So at the end, this fraction, cardboard and paper, we will have the same amount, but a very intensive changing so that at the end we have more or less cardboard and the amount of paper will decrease. Plastic packaging, fossil-based. This is the question. We have, in the last year, we have a very intensive increasing, but what will happen in the future when all these requirements, all these charges and all this law will get in power? Shall we have this intensive increasing of plastic packages or not? I think, yes, we will have it, but we will have it in the area of recycling and not in the remaining rest waste. Packaging with bio-based components like produced by algae or produced by potatoes and I think we would see what happened. I hope this will start a little bit, but I'm not sure. Tin plate packaging, aluminium packaging, nobody knows what will happen. I'm still think I'm conservative. And in the area of glass, we have a very intensive reduction of glass because we change packaging from glass to plastic. This is the background of this development. Bio-waste, normally there is no change because you need the area is the same and the behavior of the people in the kitchen not will change a lot depending on the special food waste, maybe when the activities of the governments will bring some results. It could be that the bio-waste amount you can avoid a little bit. And now, one of the biggest problems in the future, diapers, nappies. We have in Germany, so let me look where are the diapers. We have in Germany at the moment more or less 13.5% of diapers. It's a lot. I think in Brazil, Cristiano, do you know the number? Do you have a number of diapers in Brazil in the waste?
Yeah. Some waste analysis says 8%. Yes. But I think too high. But we just started to evaluating a specific diapers for not so some years ago. Mm-hmm. And then we have numbers that goes from 3 to 8, like I said. But I think 8 is too high.
Could be, but you will achieve it. Why? At the moment, we have in Germany 80% of the diapers for little kids and 20% for old people. And you know, the German society is a very old society. I think we have one of the oldest societies. Look at me. And we say in the year of 28, the amount of nappies from kids will be 50% and from old people also 50%. So in short time, will have more or less a double. So we expect in the future around 20 to 22% of diapers in the waste. And in a long-term view, you are a very young generation, but in a long-term view, you will have more or less the same development in your country. So there's a lot of changing. I think the biggest amount of changing is in the area of cardboard and paper, in the area of plastic packages, and in the area of diapers. And please pay attention when you see a waste composition and when you have to deal with it, think about that the plants you have to build, for example, recycling plant or a compost plant, you have to consider in your prognosis not only the amount of waste, but also the composition of waste. So some other steps. You know, everybody of you knows deposits. So you have to pay deposits, and when you bring your packages back, you get some deposits back. I think this will be a very important instrument in the European Union because we start now with new laws with higher deposits, and the European law required we have to take deposits on all packages, also packages for milk and other things. And this is new. And we are in a good hope that we can recycle this material in a much more intensive way than in the last years. And let me give you some idea about deposit. Sorry, here's something a little bit wrong. You see, Pfand is a German name for deposits. You see here the amount of deposits in US dollar. And you see here the returning rates. And you see very clear, the higher the amount of deposits is clear. We don't have to discuss it. The higher the amount of deposits, the higher the returning rate. And I think this is not a part of organization from different kind of cities and counties. This is a clear political step. You have to implement it in your environmental law, and you have to require your industry to implement such kind of system. This is a very, very important part for the future. And returning rates of different systems. For example, separate collection systems. You can collect some parts. Disposables plus separate collection, you have around 95% of collecting rate. And when you have returnables, we have it, for example, in the area of beer, and we have it in the area of carbon dioxide soft drinks. The combination of returnables, of deposits and returnables, so you have a returning rate around 99%. And again, this is a part, the responsibility must be in the area of industry and trading. Like we have here in some parts, only in some parts in Germany. For example, in the area of, mainly in the area of beer. We don't have it in the area of wine. So we German drink a lot of wine. We drink, I think, still more or less the same amount of wine, but there is no system. There's only a separate collecting system. So deposits on all packages. This is not a question. This is a requirement. Yes, you must have deposits on all packages. Recommendation for Brazil. Deposits on packages. Sure, no question. Beverage packages, packaging from online trading. Very, very important. Amazon has to take back their packages. They are responsible. They earn the money by online trading. And clear, the organization, the implementation and financing has to be done by the industry and by the trading companies. I say it very clear, everybody knows at the end, you have to pay it by your own because they take it on the price of the materials. No question. So let's come to recycling rates. This is a picture. You see the German amount of total waste, the potential of total waste. So we have 45 million tons of waste. This is the entire, this is the potential. Inclusive all separate collected components end to end. And so in Brazil, you have a number, it's a number I get from Christiana. It's between 60 and 80 million tons every year. So you have more or less the double of waste. And you know, the amount of waste, there is a correlation between income. The higher the income, the higher the amount of waste components. So it's very, very important. I don't understand this big difference. Christiana, can you explain it?
Yes, for sure. We have these two types of evaluation. The main type of evaluation is through this registration by directly the municipalities. They register themselves directly by the federal government, and they tell about the waste production, the waste generation. And then ABRELP, this is a private association from the companies that work at the waste sector. And they have like secondary research about waste production, waste generation, and we have a little bit difference between the figures. But we have to think that not one or the other one is really sure, because we have not around Brazil, only 50% of the cities, they have official way to weight the waste. Mostly they make through volume from a capacity of trucks, and then one or another one. We are not sure if this really the real figures.
Okay. So when we talk about Germany, we talk about 40 million tons, and when we talk about Brazil, around 70 million. And you can be sure the amount of waste increase in Germany and will increase in Brazil much more intensive than in Germany. So this is our crazy system. I like it, but it looks like a little bit crazy. So we named it separate collection system for organics, this means for bio-waste, for paper and cardboard, for packaging, and we have a collection system for glass differentiated in 3 colors. This is important. When you have a recycling rate more than 80%, then you have to separate in these different colors. And from there, you bring it to the glass manufacturing, to sorting facilities, to paper mills, to composting facilities and anaerobic digestion facilities, and to MBT or incineration. This is the German situation, and I will give you some information about this amount. So paper and cardboard, we collect around 8 million tons, light packages, more or less of 6 million tons, bio and green waste 10 million, and glass about 2.6 million. This is the amount of separate collected waste. And in total, we have a collecting rate by 66%. But collecting rate is very important. Is the material you collect in this different kind of bins inclusive all these components you don't want to have? That means all these impurities. When you, for example, collect glass, you collect also paper and metals, and the people took everything in the bin depending on the opening. So we say in a rough estimation that we say 10% of all collected components are impurities. So at the end, we have a recycling rate. That means this material we can bring back in the circle. We have around 60%. And at the end, 60% we have as recycling rate. And so we reduced our waste around 60%. In Brazil, these are also numbers from Cristiana. Will you explain it shortly?
Yeah, this is one estimation considering the values that we have in Brazil, and they are under 2% of recycling, but it is also to doubt this number because some of the informal sector in recycling is not estimated at this figure of 2%. Then it's probably too higher. And then what we have done was to consider if we have 12% of waste recovery, how much is going to be. And this is what you are showing there, around 10 million tons per year.
Okay. So that means that you have more or less, you are at the beginning of implementing recycling technologies. And one point I have to underline, we discuss a lot with the State Secretary of Environmental together with Cristiana, and he mentioned what can we do when we are in the north of Brazil and want to make paper recycling, but we don't have a paper mill who can use this material and to produce secondary paper. That means when you talk about recycling, it's not only a question of separate collection or sorting technology. You also must have an industry, you must have to build up a recycling industry. That means paper mills, that means glass manufacturing industry, that you have an industry, for example, to use different kind of plastics in the way of material recycling or in the way of chemical recycling. So both areas you have to build up to implement a recycling industry. And this needs time. I can say, for example, in Germany, we need to implement it between 20 and 25 years. With the knowledge we have now all over the world, you can reduce it by maybe to 15 years or 10 years. But I think this is the minimum time you need for implement such kind of sustainable waste management. So let me give you some information about collecting rates. I think this is extremely important to talk about the acceptance of the citizens. If they accept, for example, glass recycling, paper recycling, or bio-waste recycling, that means at the beginning, we have the people, the citizens, they have to make this separation in this different kind of bins. And here you see the quality of the recycling of the separate collection of bio-waste is very low. But when you compare these numbers with maximum, these are average numbers and this is maximum, then you see there are communities, cities and counties in Germany, they have up to 82%. Or when we take about this paper collecting, 78 to 92 or 84 to 96. So these are easy separatable components, and with bio-waste is not so easy. And we do a lot of education, of environmental education to lift up this very bad number. But I'm not very hopefully to increase this in the area of around 80%. And again, this picture I've shown you before. So when we want to achieve 80%, this would be a normal collecting rate. Then we can reduce the bio-waste by more than 2 million tons. But at the moment, we have only this 52% of bio-waste, of recycling rate. But when I show you now a picture, maybe you think about, oh, and what shall we do in Brazil? These are city structures we have very seldom in Germany. There are some areas in Frankfurt, there are some areas in Berlin, but we don't have very often because our structure of cities is totally different to Brazil, and our cities are much more smaller. But when we name the experience in such structures, we can say the collecting rates are very low, but the amount of impurities are extremely high. We say 90% of all contaminants are coming from these special urban structures we have. And so I must say, separate collection of bio-waste you can do in Brazil on the countryside, but in the cities with these high densities, like Sao Paulo, like Rio, and I'm not very optimistic that this kind of separate collection will be work. With glass, I have no problem. With paper, I see no problems. But with bio-waste, I make some question marks. So let me give you, some of you know these numbers, the reason for separate collection. And in former times, the reason was the concentration of heavy metals. And in former times, the concentration of heavy metals when we produce the compost from mixed waste was very high. But now, background is a better technology, it's a better separation technology. Now, the difference between, for example, German compost materials and Brazilian, and the numbers from mixed waste is not so high. So compost, separate collection and mixed waste, separate collection, mixed waste. This is one of the most poisonous heavy metals. It's the same. Look at nickel, lead, and zinc. There are differences, but I think they are not so important and they are not so huge that you have to make a separate collection. I think you have to think about what is more important: greenhouse gas reduction or soil production, and you have to decide. And I would say, think about, for example, mixed waste composting in some areas in Brazil. And you know, there are, for example, chromium and copper. You don't have limiting values in Brazil because your soil, also the same as with zinc, your soil need these heavy metals because in a special concentration, they are nutrients. They are micronutrients. And these are some numbers we developed with Christiane. Can you show shortly from MAPA, what is MAPA in Brazil? You know it better than me.
Ah, sim, é o Ministério de Agricultura, Pesca, Abastecimento, e ele que regulamenta, apesar da gente ter um CONAMA compostagem, mas esses valores de metal pesado e outros valores de aplicação de fertilizantes, ele que acaba regulamentando. Entschuldigung, Klaus, dass ich auf Portugiesisch gesprochen habe. Das ist die Bundesministerium, das du weißt das.
Ich weiß es.
Okay.
So I thank Christiane because you could relax 1 minute. You can hear Portuguese or not English.
Okay.
We come to the recommendation. We make a difference between bio-waste in the mixed waste and green waste. Green waste is the organic waste from cleaning the streets, cleaning the parks, cleaning the greens, and at end. And I think start with green waste collection. This is very easy, this is cheap, and the qualities you can gain or you can generate are very good. Parallel or a little bit later, start with industrial bio-waste for composting and fermentation. Industrial bio-waste is bio-waste from food production, from drinking production, and at end. And later on, and start maybe with mixed waste composting. You have to make a decision what kind of composting you will do, what kind of compost you want to produce. There's one point at the moment who makes it not so easy to fulfill this decision. Only by considering the heavy metals, I would say, try it. But now we have a new problem, and this new problem is the microplastic. And you can be sure that the amount of microplastic in a mixed compost is much more higher than in a separate collected compost. So the decision is not so easy. So at the end, we have 30% for incineration, MBT, and co-processing, and at the end, more or less 8% for landfill. I had some presentations about MBT and also waste incineration and RDF use in the cement industry. So I don't want to repeat it, but let me give you some main information again. We use at the moment 5.5% of waste in cement facilities. The maximum, if the cement facilities will take they could take 8.5%. That means, theoretically, that means the amount of 6 to 7% of waste using it as a fuel in cement industry is realistic, not higher. So I have heard in some countries they discuss 20%, 30%, some discuss 50%. No, it's not possible because the capacity of cement facilities is in Brazil a little bit higher than in Germany, but not so high that they could take all the waste. So this is a very important part. And also very important part, why we have this amount.
Can I say something about it?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to speak Portuguese, okay?
Yes, sure. I learn.
Ok. Eu só queria comentar com vocês que nós temos um trabalho desenvolvido para o Ministério do Desenvolvimento Regional, que é um anexo, chama Caderno Temático de Recuperação Energética do Plan SAB. E nesse caderno a gente fez uma avaliação da potencialidade de substituição da fonte tradicional de energia, que na verdade é o carvão coke, por combustível derivado de resíduos. E no caso do Brasil, na melhor das hipóteses, a depender do próprio desempenho econômico e da produção do cimento, a gente tem ali um emprego de 4 milhões de toneladas por ano de CDR. Então, isso significaria algo como 6%, pensando um pouco naquele valor da Brelp de geração, ou de 5 a 6% da geração total de resíduos sólidos urbanos. Klaus, ich habe nur gesagt, dass in Brasilien wir sind auch bei 5 bis 6%. Wir sind nicht mehr als das, weil wir haben fast die gleiche Menge vom Zementwerk in Brasilien wie in Deutschland.
Okay.
Ja.
Ich lerne dazu. So. Some pushing effects in Germany and maybe some we have also in Brazil. I think, Christiane, you can explain it a little bit later. In Germany, we have a law from 2001, and this law required this is not allowed to disposal, to landfill, untreated waste. And this was mainly in this time. Sorry, I need my stick. So we have a law that requires pre-treatment before landfill. And one part of this pre-treatment could be bring it to incineration, bring it in an MBT, but one part of the MBT is to produce a fuel. And so this was the beginning, more or less, taking parts of the household waste for cement incineration, cement production. Then we have a part with very high prices of oil and coke. And this was a short time that in Germany we get money for our waste from the cement industry. And now we have the main part. The main part now is the pricing of carbon dioxide. That means from the next year on, from 2024, we have to pay for each ton of cement a tax around 50 euro each ton of cement. And this is the tax for carbon dioxide, for fossil carbon dioxide. And from this moment on, we have a very good situation to produce fuels, but fuels with low amount of fossil components. That means you have to produce fuels with a low amount of plastics. It's not so easy, but in some part it's possible. Here's some information about the Brazilian situation. Christiane, you can explain it shortly. What is the situation in Brazil at the moment?
Yes, I can do. But I'm going to do in Portuguese, okay?
Sure.
Bom, eu comentei anteriormente que existe, inclusive, esse caderno temático do Plan SAB, retratando essa questão do CDR, mas eu posso adiantar que é um mercado que está bastante aquecido. A própria associação que regulamenta, onde participam as empresas de cimento, ela tem feito várias investidas junto ao governo federal para poder estar apoiando a própria formação de política pública. Existe desde 2019 uma série de instrumentos legais que vêm sendo publicados, principalmente a portaria interministerial de recuperação energética, por exemplo. Agora nós temos uma ABNT que regulamenta o próprio CDR. Então, esse é um mercado do futuro. Existem algumas plantas já em São Paulo produzindo CDR, uma grande planta produzindo CDR no estado de Pernambuco. E essa, inclusive, no estado de Pernambuco, o valor da remuneração da tonelada do CDR chega a R$ 132. Então, isso significa, inclusive, com o incremento, né, do câmbio, onde o coque ele fica mais caro e os apelos ambientais ou algumas obrigações ambientais de mitigação das emissões de gases de efeito estufa, acaba trazendo para o protagonismo essa questão da substituição da fonte tradicional pelo CDR. Ok, Klaus. Não, momento. Mas o que a gente não pode esquecer é que, quando a gente fala de recuperação energética, principalmente dos tratamentos térmicos, a gente precisa também considerar o artigo 9º da Política Nacional de Resíduos Sólidos, que define a priorização, a hierarquização dos procedimentos. Isso quer dizer o quê? Que esses projetos precisam necessariamente, até para garantia, para sua validação, junto ao ente público, precisa pensar de forma prioritária a reciclagem dos materiais e, a partir disso, o que for sobressalente, aí sim ser encaminhado para uma recuperação na forma térmica, por exemplo. Era isso. Klaus, ich bin fertig.
Ja, du sprichst wirklich so klar, dass ich dich sogar verstehe.
Super.
So at the end, again, some information about climate protection. And you see the situation in Europe that we save more than 1.3 tons carbon dioxide equivalent per ton of fuel from waste. In Brazil, the numbers are a little bit higher because the amount of reduction from landfill, the emission reduction from landfill is higher than in Germany because your number of organic is higher. And the amount of energy production is also higher than in Germany. But I have taken a question mark to it. Background is this 1.3 tons compared to 0.96 tons in Germany is based on the same electricity mix in Germany. And you remember your electricity mix according to carbon dioxide emission is much more lower than in Germany. So that at the end, the Brazilian credits are lower than in Germany because of your higher level of renewable energies. Recommendation for Brazil, intensification of measures in RDF production for cement industry, and think about to do it in combination with compost production. So that means very simple explained. All materials with a huge grain, more, I think, than 40 centimeters, 60 centimeters, you can produce a fuel. All material smaller than 60 millimeters, 60 millimeters or 40 millimeters, in this grain, the organic material is concentrated up, and this is the raw material for compost production. And so I have the opinion the production of fuel in combination with the production of compost could be one way, one solution also for Brazil. And we have now one last information from Europe. You know that we forbid the use of coal as a fuel from the year 2035. And I think with our new government, we will reduce this number to 2030. That means we close all our power plants for coal, but we need substitutes. And one substitute could be the biomass components from waste. And these biomass components you can dry and then use it as a fuel, as a substitute for the future for coal. Because coal has a very high amount of C fossil. It's around 1 kilogram, 1.5 kilogram each ton. And you know, when you have a fuel from biomass, you have more or less nothing. And I think all these ideas by reduction of carbon dioxide will influence in future the strategies of waste management very intensively. And we will find new ideas, and some ideas we still have at the moment. So these are some global tendencies. I don't want to repeat it again. I have to do it in some other presentation. And now I have to say thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much, Christiane, that you helped me. And in future, I think you can do it alone because you are a very good teacher. So thank you very much for listening.